Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
All right, guys, welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101. As always, presented by our friends over at ScentLock. I have yet to put somebody in ScentLock gear and them not be impressed. In my opinion, is the most complete whitetail system that one could get to hunt out of. I'm excited to hear Joey's thoughts on the ScentLock. But if you haven't checked it out, go check them out, guys, because they have an entire system to get you from early season all the way into late season and cover you in really any conditions that you're going to be hunting in. We are back with Joey Szatmary. Joey, how the heck are you, man?
Doing good, man. Yeah, a little bit tired. I don't think we slept much hanging out, but overall, awesome trip, awesome experience. Looking forward to diving into it with everybody, and it's going to be good.
Now, it was a great trip, and I told you about halfway through the trip, I said, dude, I don't think there's anything that brings people together like sharing a deer camp, except for maybe working out together. And so we got the pleasure of doing both. It was an absolute a blast. I left there feeling excited. I'm actually, Joey, I'm going to try to head back one more time for a quick day hunt. So my wife said, I didn't think I was going to be able to make it back. I thought I was pretty much done. And she said, yeah, well, school gets out Thursday for Christmas break. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're off for 2 weeks for Christmas break. I said, I'm going stinking hunting then. So I'm excited to try to get back there and try to put one on the ground. But we had a slow start. Walk me through kind of our start there in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so we got there, I want to say around like 5:30 in the morning. Then got kind of the briefing with Corey, which is pretty cool. So he was kind of showing us all the deer that were on the property, going through shoots, no shoots, which was all new to me. In my mind, I'm like thinking, oh, I'm just going to put anything down. So it's kind of funny for him to say, like, we can't shoot this deer. And, really fortunate to have our buddy Aaron, who was in the blind of the tree stand with me, so he could tell me if it's a shoot or no shoot, because being a new deer or a deer hunter is going to be hard for me to really be able to recognize things. But yeah, so we split up two groups. You and your brother were in a box blind, and then Aaron and I were in tree stands. It's the first time being in a tree stand. I thought it was a really cool experience. I'm not afraid of heights or anything like that, so I wasn't worried about having to climb up. But since it was just so new to me, it was like, just a benefit of doing this was getting to be in a tree stand. And we were kind of just in a high up observation style, I guess, lookout is what you would call it. Like we had just a view of a ton of land. And I would say a little bit in, it started pouring on us. So you guys got lucky over in the box blind because we got pretty trashed with rain. But Mama didn't raise no quitter. So I sat through it and took it like a champ and ended up clearing up. But yeah, like you said, kind of slow morning. The weather wasn't really in our favor. It was a little bit warmer that day. But, overall, I'd say just the experience was cool for me. And I was kind of looking forward to what was about to happen on the second hunt, and kind of just now that we're getting our lay out of the land, so to speak, we can kind of figure out where to go from there.
Yeah. And that's what, I don't remember who said it, but it was Meat Eater. We talked quite a bit about Meat Eater this weekend. And, he said sometimes it just happens too easy. Like you go into a hunt and you're like, there was no laying in your bunk at night thinking like, is this going to happen? There was no like anticipation of like, oh crap, like maybe this isn't going to work out. And so I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, man, I hope it's not like 5 minutes, a buck walks in, he shoots it, it's over. But after night one, I was kind of like, oh crap, like, is this going to happen? Because we only had 2 days to hunt, which to kill any deer with any bow, kudos to you. If you're, man, I talked to somebody one time and they're like, well, it wasn't the one I was after. And I'm like, dude, like, you climbed up in a tree, you got 18 yards from an animal, a wild animal, and you shot it with a bow and arrow, and you killed it quickly and humanely. Like, it doesn't matter how big it is. That is an accomplishment. And then you try to do it in 2 days, and then it gets pretty difficult. So after night one, where we had set morning and evening, and neither of us saw any deer, I was like, crap, what's going to happen here? However, there was a big cold front coming in. It went from like, a low of like 54 to a low of like 28. And I was like, well, Saturday should pick up. And so Saturday morning, you had a pretty stellar sit, like at one of those sits that you just remember forever. Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, first, let's backtrack and tell listeners that we almost got destroyed by a calf in a golf
Oh,
cart.
yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, so before we went to bed and woke up, we were on our way back home, and on the ranch, it was a cattle farm for those of you guys who didn't know. And it was a huge ranch. I mean, I think it was 6,000 acres, and I think we had about 3,000, right, that we were shooting on. Is that correct?
6,900 acres. And I think huntable, take away where houses sit and offices sit and, arenas. I think huntable, it's like 4,000.
Okay.
So yeah, 6,900 acres total, about 4,000 that we were actually hunting.
Yeah, and to be on that ranch for me was honestly just its own experience, because you're just looking out mile after mile and seeing all the different terrain. And the cool part is there was just free range cows basically kind of through all the parts we were going through. But anyway, it's nighttime and it's pitch black. And as we're driving back, our guide Corey was saying how he had to basically get a loose calf back in the pen or whatever. And we're kind of chuckling, and we kind of say, we'll help you out, not really thinking that he would probably think we're serious. And next thing you know, we see this calf kind of just wandering along the road there. So he gets out, starts trying to get it. But for us sitting in the cart that we were in, we could hear this thing like ramming its head back and forth into different walls. We're kind of like, oh man, like this is legit. And then your brother Aaron goes and opens the fence for it to run into, looking like a clear shot. And out of nowhere, this calf just veers in a totally different direction, slams into one fence, and then just comes straight at the golf cart that I'm sitting in.
That was a new one for me, for sure.
Yeah, it just reminded me of like we were all the clowns at the rodeo for a second there, just didn't really know what was happening, jumping out of the way. But once again, I think kind of what you were saying is what brings people together is hunting camp. And there were so many memories and stories that we had made along the way, which is really for me, I think that the best part of it. Now, icing on the cake is if you get to put anything on the ground. But for me, these are guys that I'll meet and talk to the rest of my life, and stories that we'll tell. So I thought that was just a kind of a funny way to end the evening, even though we didn't, kill anything. It was still we had some good memories and some good laughs before bed. But yeah, so anyway, next day we woke up, and I remember when we had pulled up to our spot, we were in a ground blind this time, not a tree stand. And to kind of lay out the terrain is there's basically a rock cliff and probably about a 15-foot drop. And you kind of went down this drop, and that's where the blind was. And we had a couple different pathways to get to kind of where we were at, which made it nice and easy for us to figure out where deer were probably going to be traveling. But right away, I remember when we got in there, Aaron and I both were like, this spot just feels like it's going to be a really good spot. Like we were super stoked about the terrain and kind of our position and where we were at. The weather was on our side. The light wasn't going to be an issue for us, or sunlight or anything like that. So we were really excited to begin with.
Now, if you follow me on social media, I did kind of I actually hunted back in November, mid-November. I actually hunted the same spot. I was in a tree stand up on top of the cliff, but I hunted the same spot, and I actually did a little, I don't know what you call it, a little tour of where I was hunting, and talked about how cool this place was. Really nice pinch points between creeks and ledges where they, kind of have to funnel through. And so Corey told me later on in that afternoon, like when we were on our way to pick you guys up, he's like, well, you know where they're hunting. They're hunting over there on the ledge. And I was like, oh crap. Like that's a good spot. And so I immediately got excited. And as we were texting, I hadn't, so Aaron, Zeesh was sitting with Joey. He's a good friend of mine, and he's been on the show before in the Zach Farrenball episode. Aaron was sitting with Joey, and Aaron, to say the nicest way, like, Aaron, I hope you're listening, but Aaron is just like insane. Like he talks 24/7, never stops. Like he's one of those guys that like just text you and just like, I'm bored, tell me something. And so Saturday morning during the hunt, son had been up for like an hour and a half, and I'm like, this is weird. I haven't had one text from Aaron. And usually he's sending me selfies and videos and like just being an idiot. And I'm like, something must be happening over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally text him. I'm like, dude, are you guys alive? And he responds back with a video of a spiked buck. And I'm like, oh crap. Like they have deer on them. And how far was the buck away? I mean, 20 yards?
Yeah. So it was still pretty early on. And shout out to Aaron, because he was great to have in the blind. Him and I are pretty alike, where we're goofballs, but then when we got to be serious, we get real serious. So we're kind of just having a normal conversation or whispering. And out of the corner of my eye, I start to see movement, and I look to the right, and there was a spiked buck about 15 or so, 16 yards from us, and it was making its way down to eat some food. And I remember just the excitement of seeing something, for the first time. And kind of like you had said the night before, you're halfway through this trip and you're just like, man, am I going to see anything? Like the reality starts to set in that maybe I won't. We're not sure. So for me to see that was a big pick me up, big morale booster. And then in my head, I'm like, do I shoot this thing? Do I not shoot this thing? I don't know what to do. I don't know what's right. Like he's obviously young, but this may be the only thing I see. So kind of talked to Aaron a little bit about it. And basically we just decided, it's like probably not the most ethical thing to do. He's young, let him live his life type of deal. And that we saw something was typically a good indicator that we're going to see something more throughout our time sitting there. Even though it was a little bit later in the morning, we still had like maybe an hour or two before we were probably going to call it in. So we just got to observe him. And to be honest with you, it was super active. Like there were tons of birds, we had crows, we had like mice, and just like nature was just flourishing that morning, and I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but like when you're sitting there and you're hearing all these noises and there's a lot of activity and just stuff going on, it just makes it way better to be able to sit there and kind of keep on the hunt.
I thought the same thing that morning. Leading up to, because I didn't see a deer until like time to go. But I was still hopeful because I'm like, man, coyotes are firing off this morning. Like you can hear them. They weren't doing this yesterday. They're up and about more this morning. More squirrels, more birds. And I don't know if it's just a mental trigger that like you tell yourself, yeah, you're going to see deer, or if it's like an actual, I heard one guy say that we train ourselves to remember the times we've seen deer. Like we train ourselves to remember like the moments leading up to seeing deer. And that's why like you get those feelings, you're just like, man, I'm about to see deer, or like I'm about to, a deer's about to come in. And it's because over your lifetime of hunting, you've been putting these memories back of what the wind was doing, what it felt like, what the pressure felt like. And that's why you get those moments of just like, I'm about to see and shoot a deer. And so all morning I kind of had that feeling. And so I'm really glad it unfolded the way it did for you guys. I told myself going into this, I'm like, I don't care if I sting and see a deer. I just want Joey to experience a good hunt. And which you did. And I'm excited to get into. Before we do, though, let me give a quick thank you to our friends over at Deer Crossing Archery. Because leading into this story, Deer Crossing Archery made a big difference. I, for a long time, have been a fan of Deer Crossing Archery arrows. And I called him and I said, hey, I got this guy coming to hunt with me. Dude's a national champion strongman. He's a big dude. He hits hard. I'm like, so I need an arrow that's for a big dude. And they built me out one of the most incredible shafts ever. It's on their silencer shaft, which you guys know I shoot out of my recurve and my compound. I love that shaft. They put 135 grain ethic outsert system on it. So with 100 grain broadhead, he was running 235 out front for total arrow weight of like 643 or something. No, I'm sorry, 683 or something. Just a really heavy, hard hitting arrow. And all weekend long, we were practicing and shooting, and those arrows were sinking like 6 feet into my target. And I'm like, dude, I feel sorry for any deer that you get a hold of. And sure enough, it played out to your benefit. But so what happened after the spike?
Yeah, so super excited seeing the spike, and kind of backtracking again. Like, we shot arrows all day before the trip, and no joke, I mean, I could just tell these arrows were legit. Like, I had never felt a wave an arrow like that before, and just like Dylan had said, like, I mean, these things were going further than any other arrow shot by anybody else. They were packing a punch. So I felt the same way. Like, if we do shoot something, man, is it going to be
It's gonna knock it off your feet.
Yeah. So I would say right after that had happened, it was probably within another hour or so. Once again, same exact spot, right on the right side of my eye, I start to see movement, and I look over and I see 3 doe standing there. And so I just tap Aaron real quick, and I'm like, there are 3 doe. And then there ended up actually being a 4th one, which we didn't see till a little bit later, but there's 4 total doe coming in, the same exact pathway that we just saw the spike. And that's when he looked at me and he's like, "Get your bow ready." And I just knew, like, this is going to get ready to be go time.
How far were they when you saw them the first time?
Probably, I want to say 25 to 30 yards. They were out there. Yeah, it wasn't too far, but they were moving, so they weren't just standing there. They were moving the whole way through. And, here I am trying to be as quiet as I possibly can, which in hindsight, I probably wasn't being that quiet, but it was all part of the experience. And I was trying to just hold back my excitement. But I went to go and grab my bow. And as I was trying to grab my bow, I realized it was caught on something. And I'm like, this isn't good. And I wasn't trying to make any more noise than I already had. So I kind of looked at Aaron. I was like, "Aaron, dude," I signaled that the bow is stuck. And here was some sort of root or whatever got tangled on the part of the bow. So, he's trying to work it at the bottom. I'm trying to keep my eyes on the doe so I can see what's going on. We're kind of trying to be serious and not giggle at the same time, like 2 5-year-old kids. And then we end up getting the bow free, and there are now 3 deer that are eating. And I'm looking at one to the left, and as I draw my bow and I'm looking through the sight, there's trees in the way, right? And I kind of was worried that these trees could become problematic. And for me, it would have been a pretty tough shot to make. So in my mind, this all had felt like maybe 30 seconds. Well, the whole thing ends up being about 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm looking through, and then as the adrenaline starts kicking in, because I'm processing, like, I'm about to take a shot at a deer. This is the first time I've ever done this. Like, this is a real animal. This is the first kill. A lot of things are going through my brain. My arm just starts shaking, like out of control. Like I can't hold the bow up straight, and like my arm just felt silly. There's no other way to put it. Like, I just felt like I had no control, no motor control. So Aaron's like whispering. He's like, just let the bow down for a second, like re-get your composure. So I re-get my composure, and then I draw it again, and I look at the same doe, but then he goes, "Look at the one on the right." And as I looked at the one on the right, it was quartering away. And honestly, what had helped me so much is that we had talked about this the day before, and we had practiced this shot because this is something I never have really practiced. And I don't have like a decoy of a deer target. I just have a normal target that you shoot. So being able to shoot the ones that we had in your backyard the day before helped me out a lot, because I ended up having to take the shot. So as I looked to the one on the right, quarter turned perfectly. its leg isn't in the way of the heart or the lungs. So I just zeroed it in. I think it was about 25 to 26 yards away, and then let that arrow fly, man.
Now, what Joey's talking about there, if you've listened to my podcast any amount of time, you know that I have a 3D quote unquote range in my backyard. So shout out to Delta McKenzie. I've got now I think 9 targets in the backyard. As we were going out to shoot, we actually got a surprise doorbell ring, and I'm like, go out to the door, and they were unloading new targets, and I'm like, are you serious? We're about to go out and shoot. So I added a standing bear target and a black buck target, but we went out and shot, and yeah, that's one thing that we went over. Was different shot placements for different angles on the deer, whether it's quartering away or whether you're up in a tree stand, shooting down on the deer, or aiming a little bit further back because you want to shoot for your exit of your arrow. And so we had went over all those things, and we will put out videos of those kind of tips and tricks that we went over prior to leaving out for Oklahoma. But no, that was, man, when I saw the deer, I walked up on it. And first off, let me just say this. I had absolutely no doubt in my mind that you can make the shot. If I did, I wouldn't have took you hunting. And I say that in all sincerity, not against you, but for the sake of the deer. If I think somebody can't make an ethical shot on a deer, why am I going to take them just to let them wound deer? So I had in my mind, you were able to make the shot. I'd seen you do it on 3Ds all day long, out to even 60 yards with shot. And so no doubt in my mind, but when I walked up on that deer, absolutely just a pinwheel of a shot. I couldn't have put it on a piece of paper better. Just a perfect shot. And so I was incredibly impressed to see the way that you composed yourself. And what you said there, you said, Aaron said to let down and regain your composure. Kudos to Aaron for having you do that. And kudos to you for being able to do that. I'm getting a phone call currently right now, which I wanted to mention in the podcast. Anyways, I'm getting a phone call from Chuck Adams, which, if you don't know who Chuck Adams is, one of the absolute legends of bow hunting. Pope and Young just announced today his new world record for velvet typical Sitka blacktail. So go check that out. Awesome stinking deer. Phenomenal deer. Go check it out on Pope and Young social media. New world record shot by Chuck Adams himself. But I was incredibly impressed to see you compose yourself like that. And so I want to give the listener a tip. If deer are not alert, like if they don't know you're in the area, take your time. Don't rush it. Don't rush through your shot process. You can be more slow and methodical in how you do things. So kudos to you. Also, I saw this cat on video. I saw this cat like down by his knees draw his bow to full draw and then bring it up, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, that takes some stinking strength right there. So I guess I need to work on that. But walk me through what happened next.
Yeah, so let go of the bow, and right away I just hear like a whack, and then the does just displace in all different directions. So at that point, if I had let go and it was aimed or was aimed, I knew I had hit the deer, but it just happened so fast. It's hard to really tell what just went on, because that scramble and the noise. And right away, Aaron's like, 6 shot. He was like, 6 shot. And then he kept tracking the deer, and he's like, there she goes. Like she's stumbling. And he's like, oh, she's down. And I mean, it was probably, I think, like 20 to 30 yards away from where we were in the blind when we did end up getting her. But right after that had happened, I just remember like the adrenaline dump of, I don't even know if I was breathing, to be honest with you, because I let out so much air like right away. Like, and I just kept, being like, whoa, like I can't catch my breath. This is crazy. And just the excitement and like just the rush you felt. And then in my mind, I was really hoping it was an ethical shot. I was hoping that the deer didn't suffer, like I was the last thing I wanted was any suffering or anything like that. but just to hear Erin kind of reassure me, like, great shot, she's down, like it was super clean, she's going to be dead, very fast, made me feel really good about what I had done and the shot placement. And so then it was just the waiting game. And then we'll get to the kicker of the whole thing. But yeah, that's kind of where we were at right there.
We'll get to Aaron's downfall here in a minute. Now, Joey, I'm excited to hear you describe this. Because I have tried my hardest to describe to non-hunters that feeling of when you harvest a deer. And they're like, how can you kill innocent animals? What are you, just a bloodthirsty animal and some savage walking? And I'm like, there's such an immense amount of respect for that animal, and there is a moment of remorse, and they're immediately like, oh yeah, well there you go, that shows you should have done it. And I'm like, but it's followed by a moment of just pure excitement that I have fed my family, that I have provided meat for my kids, that all of my hard work for the year. And I described whitetail hunting to you as this year-long chess match. It's fun to go out west, and it's fun to spot and stalk animals and try to get in on them. But whitetail hunting truly is like a year-long chess match. And so there's like that moment of like victory, and I outsmarted an animal that I. So I'm anxious to hear if you can describe the kind of emotions for somebody who has just harvested their big game animal for the first time. Like, can you describe that feeling that goes through you once you do that?
Yeah, I think it kind of is like an emotional roller coaster in a sense where, I'll go into it by saying how much respect I have for animals and nature. I don't want anyone to ever think that I am like some bloodthirsty killer. There's a difference between being a killer and a hunter. Like if you're just going out there and you don't have any feelings and you're just shooting whatever and not really caring about it, you're just a stone cold killer. But when you're hunting, there's such a process to it, and I've been hunting since the beginning of this season, since this is my first season. And I know some guys go maybe a whole season or years without getting anything. But for me, it's also been a couple months, of trying to figure this whole thing out and going out on my own and studying how, the animals move and what kind of conditions we need to be in. So there's really just a whole process that's involved with this. And it can be exciting. It can be frustrating, right? When you're not getting things and you're going out there every day. And then you get to the point where it's like this huge buildup, right? It's like the pinnacle in like the movie, right? The climax. Like it's just a rush. I mean, you get that adrenaline, you get that excitement, then it is followed by that remorse or that sadness. Like, like we have respect. Like when we walk up to the animal, we're like looking at it, we're taking a moment of kind of silence, we pet it because it's just like we respect you, and we're also thankful for the animal because we do get to harvest it and put food on our table for ourselves or our families, whatever. So I think it's just like to equate it as like a big project at work, right? For whatever people do for their job. And it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of energy. There's ups and downs. And then finally, like submitting that project and coming out with a good success on it, or like it was presented in an awesome way. Like you're just like, whew, like, wow, check mark. I feel accomplished. I'm happy. I'm grateful. So that's kind of, I would say, the thoughts going through for me. But yeah, I got so much respect for the sport, the community of hunters, which I don't think a lot of people really understand, right? They just look at it from the outside and they think what you had mentioned. But when you really get to know people, you understand the intentions, how humane it really is versus inhumane. And I think there's just an immense appreciation for it.
Yeah, I heard somebody one time say that nobody loves deer more than the deer hunter. Nobody loves ducks more than the duck hunter. And people don't and I really did. I had the true pleasure of I was taking my daughter out to track a deer I had shot with me, and I knew that the buck was down. I knew I saw it drop in the field. But I still wanted to go home and get my daughter. I wanted to be a part of the process. so I drove home and I got my 10-year-old, and on the way out, like, we were talking, she didn't understand limits. Like, she didn't know, oh, Dad shot his buck in Kansas, he's done, he only gets one buck. And she's like, well, why is that? And so I started kind of walking her through the ideology of the North American model of conservation. And, telling her that each state, each county looks at their deer population and how many need to be harvested for population to continue on the way that it should. And she said, well, and I said, sweetheart, do you understand that by killing deer, we're helping there be more deer? And she was like, what? Like, she couldn't understand that. And I was like, well, sweetheart, if there's too many deer, there won't be enough food to hold the deer. They'll all starve and die. Same with, we talked about elephants in Africa, and how they die like this morbid, horrid death of starvation, if they're not hunted and killed. And so I walked her through that entire kind of process of we have to, as hunters, be conservation minded, that we're trying to help deer populations for the long haul. And there are deer that need to be shot. There are does that need to be shot. There are way too many bucks, and we need to kill some off. And so nobody loves the animal more than the person that's hunting the animal, because we want to see long-term sustainability for whitetails in North America. We want to see long-term sustainability for antelope in North America, and I could go on, but so it's just something that I don't think the non-hunting community understands. And I think that anybody who harvests their first big game animal, they finally have that flood of emotion, and they're like, this is what hunting is. Like, this is what I've never wrapped my mind around. Like, I get the idea of the pursuit. I get the idea of outsmarting them, but you can't understand that pure raw emotion of walking up on an animal that you've just killed until you do it. And so I'm incredibly excited I wasn't with you on the shot, but I was with you on the recovery, and I'm incredibly excited that I got to experience that with you. Now to Aaron's downfall. What happened next? Aaron, if you're listening, you suck.
Well, I have to take 50% because I listen to him. I'm not going to throw him under the bus like that, but at the same time, yeah. And listen, hindsight's 2020, right? Like, it's just the way it is. But anyway, so we sit there for about an hour and a half, and we're waiting for to see if anything else comes through, and nothing had. And Aaron looks at me and he's like smiling, like giddy, and he's like, "Do you want to go check out your arrow?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, you do." Like, he was just excited. So we get out of the blind and we walk down, and so when I had heard the initial whack, like, I remember this distinct whack sound, right? Like two pieces of wood just smacking against each other when I had fired the arrow. Well, what happened is the arrow went straight through the doe and into a tree. So that's I think what I had heard was that loud, like, just the hitting of the arrow into the base of a tree, basically. But you could see the blood through all the way through on the arrow, and it had air bubbles, which was a good sign. I remember kind of YouTubing that and like listening to like the difference of like if it's bright red, or dark red, or if it's like greenish, etc. So I was like, okay, that was a good sign. And then there was just blood everywhere. So once again, to talk about those arrows that we had gotten, I mean, this arrow went straight in with a big hole and came out with a big hole, and it did its job. So we didn't want to go find the doe just yet because we wanted to wait for everybody and you guys were on your way. But anyway, we walked back to the blind, and we're standing there probably about 5 to 6 yards from the blind, and we're having a conversation. And once again, out of the corner of my eye, I see a huge buck. And I look at Aaron, I go, "Buck." And he looks at me kind of like I'm joking. And then he turns his head and he just gets wide eyes. Like, his eyes are like a deer in headlights at me. And I look at him and I'm like, what do we do? Because I had my bow in the blind. And if you know Aaron, this is pretty hilarious, but the buck had looked at us, and when the buck had looked away for a second, Aaron just drops on the ground. He literally just went down, and he did it in the most quiet way that I don't even know how he did it, but he was just on the ground and laying behind a rock, and he's looking at me, and now I'm just standing there. And every time the buck would look away, I would try to take a couple steps towards the blind, and we were playing this like red light, green light back and forth with the buck looking at me trying to get in the blind. Now, mind you, I'm a 6'2", 260-pound male, and this blind zipper is probably 5'6", and not quiet at all. So
every time you're going in and out of it, you feel like you're being birthed. Like you have to like push out and like crawl out of this blind and like pop back together.
All I can think about is if anyone's ever seen the movie Ace Ventura, where he's stuck in the rhino's butt and he's trying to come out of the mechanical rhino. Yeah, that was me. Yeah. So I'm like, there's no easy way around this. Like, I have to get in here somehow. So I get in, and of course there's gotta be some noise. And I grab the bow, and as we look, it didn't spook him per se. Like, he didn't charge off or anything like that, but it was enough of a noise to make him be aware and curious. And then he just kind of like trotted away, like nice and slow, but it was just the wrong direction. So Aaron jumps in the blind, and then he does a grunt call real quick to see if we can get his attention. He looks for like a second, and then kind of just like, nah, and then kept going. So that was a tough one, for us, because if we just waited this had to have been like 3 minutes tops, that we went out, looked at the arrow, went back in the blind. But as somebody probably said, like, that's hunting, like that's the way that it went down. But it was really cool to see how gorgeous a big buck was. Like, I had never been that close to a big buck. And I think he was probably in the 2 or 3 year mark. I think we thought he was like an 8-pointer or so, but just a stud to see. And it was a really cool experience overall. And my adrenaline was pumping once again, but, followed by a lot of mixture of emotion. And that was kind of one of the coolest parts of it, was just seeing that.
Now, when you say you saw him, like, was it 100 yards or 40 yards? Like, how close was he when you first saw him?
Like 20 yards. Yeah, he was super close.
So 2 lessons that I take away from this is don't listen to Aaron. No, I'm just kidding. Stay as long as you can. You don't know when it'll happen. I understand, like, there's always that cutoff. Like, I always give myself that cutoff of like, okay, I need to leave it at 10:30 because I got to get back and work or whatever. So there's always that cutoff for like, I got to take the kid to school, so I got to leave here at 11. But I want to stay in the blind as long as I possibly can, because you never know when it's going to happen. And so there's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is take your stinking bow with you if you're walking around the woods. No, we've literally all been there. That deer that I shot here in Kansas this year, I climbed out and I had one doe tag, and I really wanted to kill a doe, just to get some more meat in the freezer. And I had a doe tag, and I saw the buck drop in the field, and I still waited for like an hour and a half because I was like, it's still early. I'm going to hang out and hunt. And I got out and started walking to go get my deer. And I had been out of the blind for like 45 seconds, and boom, a doe pops out in the field. And I'm like, you gotta be stinking kidding me. But that's how it goes. And that's just how it happens. So, let's talk a little bit about your expectations versus reality. Now need I remind everybody listening to this, I'm a big proponent of not falling into the trap that you see on social media of, wow, this guy went hunting and it took him a day and a half and he shot a deer. Because that's not reality for a lot of people. For a lot of people, they might go 2 seasons of grinding it out, trying to kill their first deer. We were at a world-class outfitters, Liberty Ranch Outfitters, there in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. But Joey's also put in the work. Like, Joey's put in the time and the effort. And this wasn't just a swing and a miss luck type of deal. We went into this with a game plan. We went into this having practiced a shot. We went into this practicing different scenarios, from an elevated platform to shooting from your knees to shooting sitting down, and we had practiced all of these things. And so, but I also don't want you to just fall into the trap of, oh, why is it taking me a year? I must just suck at this. I give up. Because that's not reality of a lot of times. But I want to talk to Joey real quick about your expectations going into this, and kind of how it all played out.
Yeah, kind of just like you had said, I've been at it for several months for my first season. So, I had been putting in the work, and, uh, for my first season too, I mean, this is not to discredit that it's a doe, but it's not a buck, So it's like, you have to be happy with whatever you're presented with and grateful for it. And kind of like you had said, somebody said to you, like, that's not the one I was looking for. Well, it doesn't matter. Like, it's still something, So, for me, it's been a journey, and I won't lie. Like, being at a world class outfitter, I thought it was probably going to be easier than it was. Like I know we only had 2 days, but for me, that after that whole first day of sitting, like, I was pretty shocked. Like, I didn't see anything, so it's almost like, man, like, even at a world class outfitter, like, you can still run into problems, which is probably the reality of it that people don't think about. Like, you still have to put in the work, and you still have to, like, do your research and fall in love with the process of it, because there could be a chance that even if you go to a world class outfitter, that you don't get a shot at a buck or a doe, and that's just the reality of hunting. There's a part of it that it's a gamble, and it's just tough. But I think at the same time, it was everything I expected. Where we did see a ton of deer, and the one night you were out, you had saw like 30 or 40 deer you were telling us about at a spot that we were already at, and we saw nothing. So that just goes to prove the point of, like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be somewhat, of a challenge to figure this all out. But
I'm glad you learned that lesson so quick, because I must be a little slower than some. But like, you think like, oh, I'm going to this outfit, like, I'm going to see 100 deer, I'm going to shoot this 200-inch buck, and life's going to be perfect. Hunting is still hunting, no matter where you're at, no matter if you're guided or unguided, public land, private land. Hunting is still hunting, and with that comes things that we can't control. I would have done anything to have changed it from being a high of 70 on Friday. You're talking mid-December. We were hunting December 11th, and it was 70 degrees. There's just things that are out of your control, no matter what, and that's what makes part of hunting. And that chess match of, I'm just not going to see any deer today. It's just not my day, and so I'm glad you learned that lesson. It took me a lot longer. Like, I just go into these things expecting to have seen deer, and expecting to shoot deer. And I remember the first time I really learned that lesson. I was hunting with some guys, wasn't guided, wasn't an outfit, but I was hunting with some guys that own and operate SNS Archery out of Idaho, and I really went into that expecting, like, big things. And we saw one bear. I shot at it and I missed, and I left that, like, thinking, like, man, hunting is still hunting, no matter who you're with, no matter who's guiding you, no matter what kind of land you're on. Hunting is still hunting, and there's just things we can't control. So, kudos to you, man, for learning that lesson a lot quicker than I learned it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had to tell myself something, or else I was going to be really bummed out. So it's like, you equally gotta, like you said, just realize that, yeah, it's hunting. I think the difference is, and I could be wrong though, is the the quality of bucks that we saw pictures of. I mean, these things were like, I've never seen anything like that before. So, when you go to an outfitter, just like even the health condition of the bucks, like, they were good looking, stout, muscular looking bucks. Where, around where I live in PA, not to say there aren't some monsters out there, but not what you're seeing at a consistent base when you go to an outfitter. So for me, like, yeah. I think I was expecting, like, and kind of, I would do want to say, you probably hinted at it, like, you're going to see some monsters here. But like that's what you're paying for, and that's why you're going there, is because they are going to have those monsters, and it's just a matter of you can get them and you can find them. But I think that played into my expectation of it, which held true, and just like I said, being on an outfitter, like the gorgeousness of the terrain. We stayed in a really nice cabin. We had awesome service. Our guide was phenomenal. So all that just made it a great experience for me.
So if you could say biggest lessons learned from this weekend, what would they be?
Don't get out of the freaking blind.
Don't listen to stinking Aaron. If you have a long-haired hippie hunting with you, don't listen to him.
He's a carrier. I think that was a big one. And who's to say that that's going to be tough? Like at some point, there's got to be a cutoff. So it's a matter of maybe we just stay in a little bit longer next time. But at the same time, it's hard to say because that is just hunting. We talked about this one before, but and I'll kind of mention it too because you were asking what I thought about ScentLok in terms of their gear, but understanding the weather, right, and having some sort of layering system, which ScentLok does a phenomenal job of, and I have a bunch of their stuff now, which you kind of helped turn me on to. But we hunted our first day in 70 degrees, and then the next day dropped to 30 some degrees. Like you got to have some sort of game plan, because if you're sitting out there and you're either too hot or too cold, that becomes a miserable hunt real quick. We talked about in our other podcasts, like you could lose focus. I had an adrenaline rush. Now imagine if I was cold or if I was too hot, like maybe I would have whiffed on that shot. I have no idea. But that is where I think gear comes into play, and kind of understanding the terrain, the weather, and stuff like that. It did pour on us, and I was fortunate to have good stuff on. So I wasn't miserable, and it was enough to just, maybe get slightly damp, but dry really quick. And we sat out there for another couple hours. So I kind of got a good run of the gambit when it came to weather and gear.
I think also one thing that this weekend definitely taught us, and definitely how those two encounters with those deer is that things happen fast in the woods. Like, where I was sitting in that observation blind that you mentioned, you could see the deer coming from 500 yards away. But even still, I was watching deer over here, and all of a sudden I hear a deer behind me at 30 yards, and I'm like, oh crap, there's, you know what I mean? Things happen fast in the woods, and especially when you're down in a thick bottom like you guys were. Boom, there's deer at 25 yards. You see them, it's time to shoot. It's not always, oh, here comes a deer, let's get ready, it can be just a blink of an eye and there's a deer in front of you. And so when things happen fast like that, which they did for you both times, when you saw the 4 does and when the buck popped out of nowhere, give me some. What was your takeaway from things happening fast like that, and how to make it happen when things do happen fast?
Biggest thing I'd say is just keep your composure. You're instinctively going to get excited, and you have to remind yourself to stay calm. Don't make too much noise. Like that's a big one. Something I definitely have to work on. Like talking to Aaron, he's like, being in a blind afforded us a little bit more of noise control, but in a tree stand, you don't have that. So just being able to just keep your composure, stay still, keep your eye on the target is another big one too. I feel like, where it's easy to probably not look at the target when you're trying to do stuff, but you want to keep your eyes on the doe or the buck, whatever it is, just so you can see where it's moving. So when you get your draw ready, and you're going to get faster shot placement. So yeah, overall, I think the biggest thing is just, I know I keep saying it, but just composure.
Yeah. I absolutely, just because things are happening fast in the woods doesn't mean things have to happen fast with you, which again, I was stoked that Aaron told you, just let down, man, gain your composure back, take a breath. Because sometimes we see a deer coming in quick and we think we have to be so quick and we have to move around so quick and do things. But just because things are going on around us quick, we can still work slow and methodically, and we can think through everything that we're doing. And so again, I was pumped that Aaron kind of walked you through that. So on the end of that arrow, we had a big, heavy, hard-hitting arrow, tipped off with the SK2 from Sick, which those of you who don't know, Sick Broadheads is owned by Bear Archery. I'm sorry. It's owned by Escalade Sports, which also owns Bear Archery. And it is the finest mechanical I've ever seen. And Joey's story is a testament to that. Blew through the shoulder. The whole shoulder was just the back end, the exit shoulder was just disconnected from the doe, and it stuck into a tree. And I don't think Joey had a hard time following that blood trail. It was like, oh, wow, here it is. This is like a highway painted to where this deer is. Walking up on that doe, man, what was your first thought?
I mean, it was a mixture of I was so excited, and then I was sad for a second there. Like we talked about, just kind of appreciating, the animal. Like it's laying there dead. Obviously, it's just something I take lightly that I did kill something. But then there was that extreme excitement of like, we've completed the task. I traveled all the way out to Kansas and Oklahoma, and it kind of just came full circle, so I think that was really cool. And then to be honest with you, I was super excited to harvest it and have meat, like nothing's going to waste on my end. So then it was just a lot of feeling of excitement and accomplishment, after I had that moment of feeling down and remorse for the animal.
How was your first meal?
Oh, it was phenomenal. So I did the back straps, which is crazy too, how they shrunk a good amount from. I remember the picture I held up. Like it's crazy how much meat there was. And then when you cook something, how it does shrink up. But man, was it delicious! I just did some basic seasoning, salt, pepper, some garlic, nothing too crazy. Put it on the grill, not too long, and man, amazing. And the other thing that's cool is I got to share it with my family. So I got to celebrate and give it. Yeah, give it to my family. And I'll tell you, there's just something very special about eating something you put the work in for. It is way different than when you just go to the grocery store and, we're talking about, being ethical. Like that is not ethical compared to what we just did. And I think that's like really the way that I want to try to live my life as much as I can. And I'm just excited to continue on with it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, to a non-hunter, you cannot explain. Like, I cannot explain cooking the meat that I killed, eating the meat that I killed, feeding the meat to my kids that I killed. Like, you cannot explain that to somebody else. It's not just a feeling of like, oh yeah, it's my meat I shot. Like, but when you have friends and family come over and you say, yeah, this is that doe I shot in Oklahoma. And man, did I ever get to tell you that story of how it happened? And I mean, it's something so surreal that, I didn't go to the meat and buy this. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't go to the store and buy this meat. I went out and I froze my tail end off in the rain for it. And, then we took it and hung it and we cut the meat out. Oh, it's such an experience, man, that I wish more people could really truly wrap their minds around. But I am so excited that you got to experience it.
Yeah. I mean, truly is an amazing experience. I wish more people give it a shot and try it out and just at least say that they tried it. But I think I'll find that most people are really going to enjoy it and the process, and the work it just takes that's put in to finally harvest that animal. So for me, it was truly an amazing experience and kind of went exactly the way I wanted it to in terms of, when I first started, I wanted to be someone who's more self-reliant. I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. I wanted to put the work into something. And, I started checking all the boxes on that and here we are. So it was just a great overall experience. And I got to meet some awesome dudes, that we were hanging out with. And I think that's just such an added benefit of the whole thing is the stories, like you had said, the camaraderie, just adds to the experience.
Sitting with Aaron in a ground blind for 2 days, will get you out of your comfort zone. I can tell you that from experience. Like, that will get you out of your comfort zone. No, Aaron is a great guy, man. And again, I was so thankful that he was there to be able to help you and walk you through that. No, Joey, from the bottom of my heart, man, I'm so stoked that you got to come here. I'm so stoked that we got you an animal. Sure, I wish it was a giant buck, but that's just not how the weekend played out. And so, but I mean, remember, look at it this way, and I'm not trying to like downplay anything that happened. I've spent now this year 7 days hunting at Liberty Ranch, and I haven't harvested a buck yet either. So I mean, that's hunting, and hunting will always be hunting. And there's things that we can't control, and there's things that we just got to roll with the punches. But I am incredibly excited that you got to come here. I'm incredibly excited that you shot your first deer. And guys, if you haven't listened to the first episode where we kind of taught Joey the basics and walked him through a couple things, make sure and head back to last episode and listen to that. Make sure and head over to my social media or Bear Archery's YouTube. And we're going to be, over the next week, putting out some of the videos that me and Joey did, covering the tips that we covered before we left for the hunt. So if you're wondering, where do you start with a new hunter? What kind of tips do you tell somebody going, for the first year of hunting? I walked through a lot of those things with Joey, and those will be up pretty shortly on my social media or Bear Archery's YouTube. So go check them out there. Before we go, I got to give a quick thank you to our friends over at NZ Campers. NZ Campers is out of Colorado, and they are purpose-built campers that are built for hunters by hunters, and they are absolutely phenomenal, with some things built into them that every hunter needs: boot dryers, meat storage, scent-free cabinets, ozone cabinets, just really cool campers that can haul your ATVs, UTVs, whatever, to the mountain. And then you fold your bunks down. Really cool campers. Go check out NZ Campers, ENZY, on social media or their website. Joey, where can they find you at, my friend?
Yeah, so you guys can find me. YouTube is Zat Strength, SZAT, the word strength. Same thing with my Instagram. And then if you want all the content, articles we put out related to health, fitness, strength training, it's zatstrength.net. So that's where you can find anything with me related.
Go check them out, guys. Thank you for listening. You guys have a great week and a very Merry Christmas coming up